Hi, this is Paul James Caden, and welcome to the Spirit Side Podcast. In this show, we will endeavor to talk about a wide array of subjects with a balanced and spiritual perspective. We will discuss such things as current events, strange stories in the news, spirituality, the paranormal, and much more. But most importantly, it is my hope that this humble podcast will keep people informed and make a positive impact in the lives of those who listen. So once again, welcome, and I'll see you on the Spirit Side.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spirit Side. This is Paul James Caden, and joining me on the podcast today is Mr. Julian Jenkins, who is a medium, psychic, and teacher from Wales in the UK. Julian, thank you for joining us today on the Spirit Side.
Paul, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm super excited when you sent me an email asking me to come on. It's really good to be here.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, I came across Julian. I'm always taking courses online. I've been doing readings since 1994, 95, and I came across this little course on a site called Udemy on mediumship, and I took the course. There were several. I watched his intro to the course, and of course I took it, and I said, man, you know, this is a guy who has integrity. He's passionate about what he does. He's not out there just for show to look good like some of these other, you know, a lot of these folks that say they're teachers, but they're more I think they give people hype jobs. You know, they have a lot of energy, and then they give you information that isn't necessarily good. But I really felt that Julian was definitely different, and I said, this is somebody that I have to have on the podcast and bring some of his knowledge and just passion for, you know, spiritualism and the spiritual to the audience. And what we're going to talk about today is how spirits interact with the living or with people who are still on the earth. You know, I'm sure as a medium, you have a lot of people that will come along and say, is my mom okay? Is my dad okay? Are they at peace? You know, they're worried about their loved ones on the other side, if they're okay. Maybe they even have a little doubt. Is there an afterlife? You know, are they still alive and well out there somewhere? So as a medium, I mean, that's one of the things I want to kind of dig into here. A lot of people, some practice mediumship, others don't. Others say that they're just not able to do it. It does take time and practice to get there. What are some of the ways that the average person can look for that spirits will be interacting with them? Because I do believe and I know that when our loved ones pass away, that they are around us. They do try to let us know that they're there, they're okay, they're still with us. So what are some of the ways people can get those messages from their loved ones or notice them in their everyday life to get a little confirmation for themselves about this whole afterlife scenario?
I think it's a really good question, and it's a great one to open up with. I think my backstory is I've been with spirit since I was 6 years of age, and I remember as a child having, you know, I can only describe it as probably astral projection with one of my guides, even at that young age, where they would take me all over the place, and I would go to school the next day, and you know, in a very small town in the UK, and tell them about, which is a very poor town, tell them about, you know, the pyramids and all of these amazing places, and, you know, some of the, you know, Taj Mahal and things like this. And they'd be saying, like, how does this boy know this? And it got to the point that they called my mum into school. And then I had to go and have, and I think back now even more so, that I had to go and have my brain read, because my activity in my head was too much. I can remember as a child having this cap put on my head with all these wires coming out of it, they were trying to understand why my brain activity was so high. And then, as always in this world that we live in, they prescribed me a whole host of drugs to lessen the activity. And needless to say that, some of the spiritual stuff, it didn't happen so much then. And as I got older, obviously I came off the medication. And when I look back at that childhood, I understand exactly, even at 6, it was my calling, it was my waking, my spiritual awakening, even at such a young age. And then coming through that, I was heavily involved in sport. I was a professional soccer player here in the UK for a period of time. And then I was working in sport, and being in such an alpha male environment, it was always difficult for me to come out and say who I really was, because of the fear of, okay, if you know this, tell us what the score is going to be today. Or, there was many opportunities, for it to be ridiculed. And I just wanted to keep that part of my life very, very private. And it was only sort of 2 years ago I came out of the spiritual closet, if you like, and said, this is who I am, this is what I do, and enough to go. And so I've always been in connection with spirit, and I've always had a connection with my guides who came to me at 7 years of age. And, so I've always been with spirit. And I think when somebody asks me the question now, it's, so you're a medium. Well, I actually have a joke. I actually say I'm an extra large medium, albeit I'm trying to lose weight at the moment. But I always have a bit of a joke, because I try and lighten it, because what can you see? Is someone stood behind me? Is this? And I suppose that the only way I can liken it really is to that, if I said to somebody I was a comedian, they'd ask me to tell a joke, or if I said I was a magician, they'd ask me to show them a trick. So, it's the same thing with mediumship. And people say, and then the next question is, well, can I be a medium? And the answer is yes. Everybody can be a medium. It's like everybody can sing. Some will sing in front of 100,000 people, and people will pay them huge amounts of money because they're very good. And some will empty a room like a fire, like a fire alarm. But they love singing, and they can sing, but some sing better than others. And I think that's with mediumship. I think, everyone has the ability to connect with spirit. The strength and power of that connection and the ability to connect will be based on the ability of the person. So when somebody says to me, can I be a medium? I think what can I do to try and connect with spirit, and how can I know whether my mum is around me, or, I'm noticing this, what can I do? I always say that, just our eyes are open, but a lot of us don't see. We have 2 ears, and that we don't listen. And a lot of people talk about, spiritual awakenings as if, you're going to be laying in bed, there's going to be a big crash of thunder and lightning, and there's God or Jesus stood at the end of the bed with all of the music going on, and angels and bugles. And the reality of the situation is, people's spiritual awakening can start with them just thinking about, they'll notice they start to, ask different questions to their own lives as much as to anybody else's. They start to become more empathetic. They start to do all of these things. So, in a long and short answer to the question is, how can people start to attune? And it's very much, for me, is about people starting to listen, and people starting to people starting to see. Just because you've got eyes, it doesn't mean we see things. And what's really interesting for me was when I hit 46 years ago, my father passed away 10 years ago, and it was a monumental change and shift in my life. My father was a medium as well, and albeit I didn't really know that. Because again, he kept that in his spiritual closet. But when he passed away, that had a huge effect on my life, and to the point that I had gone from this super confident guy to somebody who was suffering from anxiety, panic attacks. I was a director at a high level business here in the UK, £50 million a year. And, it really, really affected me. And I stumbled across, at one stage I had to go and see, I was in a meeting, and all of a sudden everything just went a bit funky on me, and people were talking to me, and it was like, woo, and I didn't know what was going on. And it was a panic attack of the highest order, really. And I went to see a psychologist because I said, enough's enough. And she put me onto this guy called John Kabat-Zinn. who he's the guy that co-created something that's called MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction, which helps you through mindfulness, through breathing, through through understanding thought, through understanding all of these things. It gives you the ability to be able to live moment by moment. And I say to a lot of people, and again, it relates into the mediumship, because I firmly now believe that the core pillar of mediumship is mindfulness. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But, for me, it is about if you're out walking your dog and you're in a field or wherever you are, you don't hear nothing. If you stop and just listen and just be in that moment without thinking about anything else, you will start to hear an array of things. I've just done it now, and all of a sudden I can hear the slight hiss, and we couldn't hear that. We've been talking now for 8 minutes. So people say, what about mediumship? Well, you need to listen, because a lot of these things are just so subtle. Like that hiss that's here now, we can tune into that, and we can start to really hear that and start to work with that. And that's the same with mediumship. It is about listening. It is about, staying there with your eyes open. But in the main, it's about getting out of the way of yourself, because I call it a muggle mind. I'm quite a big Harry Potter fan. I think they're amazing films. And he talks about muggles being everybody who's not a wizard. I sort of joke about it, but our muggle mind gets in the way of a lot of stuff, and that mind of ours, which is there for us to survive, fight or flight, etc., doesn't like the thought that there could be information or noise coming from somewhere else apart from what it knows, and then it can step in, and that's where self-doubt and confidence and ego and all of these other things come in that stifle mediumship development. But in the initial stages, I would say listen and don't doubt, and just try and work with the subtle energies. And when you're laying in bed at night and you want to get messages or you want something to happen, intention in spirit is huge. And just sit there and listen and say, right, I'm ready for the next 5 minutes before I close my eyes. For you, if you want to bring somebody close, just bring somebody close, and I'm just going to sit here and listen and see what happens. Because, for me, that's how it all starts.
It is, and that's one of the things I always tell people is to listen. And one of the ways that I tune in, and I've never had anybody teach me how to connect with spirit or angels. Where I used to live, there was no such thing as a spiritualist church. Mm-hmm. We had little New Age and metaphysical bookshops here and there, but there was nowhere you could go to take a course or inquire of anybody, how do I do this? What's happening with me? Why am I experiencing these things? So one of the things I came up with is very early in my life, I had an experience, an angelic experience. And as I got older and not, again, having anybody to ask about these things, one of the techniques I would use is just focus on that presence. How did it feel when that being was near me? Mm-hmm. And I've heard people say, trance mediums, they will say when you want to go into trance, a way to cheat and get into trance is just remember how it feels to be in trance once you've achieved it, and you'll go there much quicker. Yeah. And I guess it's the same thing. I'll say just focus, close your eyes, remember what it was like to have your loved one there, their presence. You were at peace, you loved them, they loved you, feel that love. Don't think about anything, ask your question. You can ask if they're there, Mom, Dad, are you there? Are you with me? And just focus on that presence. And I always get something that comes through at that point, that presence, that remembering almost just seems to take over. It fills the room, it fills me, and things will always come through. So I tell people, light a candle, put on some relaxing music if you need to, anything just to get you in that mood, and just tune into their presence, ask questions, and listen for what comes.
Yeah, and I think that's sound advice. I think for me, and I strip it back to mindfulness. the ability to be able to create a space. See, people get confused about meditation, and people think meditation is being able to quieten the mind and not have any thoughts. Well, for me, that's rubbish. Actually, meditation is all about a single point of focus with no judgmental thoughts. And the problem what we do as humans is we try and hang on to the thoughts that we like, and we try and push away the thoughts we don't like. And the reality is, really, we have to treat them both the same. Is you let the thought in, you breathe it in, you accept it, you acknowledge it, you let it go. And you come back to your breath and you create this space. Once you start to create this space, spirit will fill it. And it's amazing how many people come to me who are fishermen, who are Reiki teachers, who are, healers, people who have done, physiotherapy, or, because they've got this heat lamp and they're holding it on a certain spot for like 5 minutes, and they're focusing on a spot and they're not thinking of anything else apart from that spot. And all of a sudden they get something come to them. Or the fisherman will say, I was there, because fishing is meditation. There's a single point of focus, which is the end of their rod. And they're waiting for it to go ping, ping to see if there's a fish on it. And they're sat there watching this rod, and that's meditation. And if they think about, oh my God, is the tide coming in? They'll think, oh, I haven't watched my rod, and they go back to the rod, and the rod is their anchor, and they move, and they don't understand that. And that's why strangely, a lot of fishermen have a lot of ghost stories. They have a lot of, okay, they're in the dark, they're in these areas, but I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that they've created this space where they've got out of the way of themselves, got out of the muggle mind, and created a space for their subconscious and their connection and their receptors to start to receive and start to feel that in the moment, these subtle energies, which then come to them, and they haven't got a clue what's going on. And going back 6 years ago when I went, my wife sent me on my birthday up to the hills of Alicante in Spain for 10 days, where I did the complete crash course on mindfulness-based stress reduction. The amount of spiritual happenings, and it was just incredible, because I didn't have any internet, I didn't have any phone, I didn't have anything. I didn't even, and all I was trying to do all of the time was to get away from my muggle mind, my fight or flight, my ego, myself, my confidence, all of these things. And it really opened me up to spirit. So when people start to talk to me about, can you help me become a better medium? Yeah, of course I can. Of course I can. That's my job. That's my calling. But what you'll find, Paul, and I don't know whether you find this as well, is normally when you go to somebody to teach you to connect with spirit, and I use a golfing analogy here, they teach you how to putt, okay? Because that's the end result. And people want to teach you to putt. And in mediumship, they want to teach you how to give a message. What they don't tell you is how you get the golf ball on the green in the first place. And there's so much more that goes into it. And mindfulness meditation is, for me, the pillar, the opening of mediumship and even psychic work. And again, people get confused about, psychic medium, and they don't understand the differences between the two, and they're very different. But what I try and teach is the fundamentals of your swing. How do you drive? How do you chip out of a bunker? How do you come off the fairway? How do you, all of these bits and pieces. And then we'll talk about, putting, because ultimately I think our responsibility is to have a connection and relationship with our inner self, which then helps the connection and relationship with spirit. And if you haven't got a connection and relationship with yourself, your ability to be able to have a connection and relationship with spirit diminishes. I'm not saying it disappears, but it diminishes. How can you connect with spirit when you're not connected with yourself? And the analogy I always give is, I don't care how much you spent on your cell phone, whether you've got the latest iPhone, the latest Samsung. If you have no cellular signal, you cannot make a call to anybody. And it's exactly the same with spirit. And the cellular signal is your connection with yourself, understanding your inner self. Because if you haven't got that, I think you may get lucky. You might get one text message through, or you might be able to make a call for 5 minutes and you go, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? Oh, the signal's gone again. You'll get some of that. What you won't get is a 4G signal or a 5G signal now, what nobody wants. But then you can download color images. You can do video and that's what happens. So when you get that inner connection with yourself, and then you start to build that connection with spirit, which for me, again, my belief is our only commitment and our only role and responsibility is to be able to amplify our connection with spirit. Because when we have that connection with spirit, we have an infinite source of philosophy, of healing, of energy, of proof, of evidence, of everything that we need in our spiritual toolbox. Our job is to ensure that we've got fiber broadband into spirit, and not a 28K dial-up from many, many years ago where you can't download pictures, or you can't do this and you can't do that. So what I try and teach people is to connect with themselves, understand themselves, build that connection, and then build that connection relationship with spirit. And then once you've got that connection, relationship, spirit, and you have that ability to be able to talk, see, hear, the world's your oyster.
Right. Now, when you say build that connection, build that relationship with spirit,
mm-hmm.
how might people go about doing that? I mean, it's of course in relation with connecting with themselves. Some people might hear that and go, well, that sounds good, guys, but how the hell do I do that? How do I build a connection with myself and spirit?
Yeah, and they're all valid questions, and that's why I'm so busy, because everybody's asking the same question, and it's in anything you're trying to do, I'm trying to solve problems and provide value, and I'm trying to scale that. And it's interesting what you said earlier on, where you said that everything was happening, but you didn't have any opportunity to talk, or have any resource, or have any church, or you just had to muggle and find your own way through it. And that is one of my main motivations, that when I was between the ages of 16 and 22, I didn't have a clue what was happening to me. I had no opportunity, really. I didn't have the confidence to walk through a church door. There was nothing that was open to me. I could be in a room of 1,000 people, but I would be extremely lonely. And what I wanted to do, and this is part of what I do on Udemy, and one of the reasons I do Udemy is the scalability of it. I have now 3,000 students in 68 different countries, speaking 28 different languages. And the scale of that, and I say it because even when I say it now, it astounds me. But what I'm doing is giving them the ability not to have that information knowledge gap, and that they don't feel lonely. And because a lot of people, and I'm digressing slightly, but a lot of people that, like yourself, like me, I call us sensitives, okay? And that just doesn't mean we're sensitive. So, if somebody calls us a name, we start crying. It's being sensitive to everything. And, people, and we're 1% of the population, the true sensitives. That means 99% of the world doesn't get us. But we have to live in that world, and we have to understand the physical and the spiritual, and we take the philosophy from both, and we bring it together, and we got this really eclectic mix of wonderment, if there's such a word. But it is all about understanding that and working with it, and the ability to be able to have a resource like your podcast and the stuff that I do on Udemy or via my website or whatever the scenario is hugely important. And the question you ask is, well, that's great, Julian, that sounds amazing, but how do I connect with myself, and how do I connect with spirit? And the connecting with self is all about mindfulness. And I keep coming back to that. It's a word that I will consistently use. It's mindfulness, and the ability to meditate for periods of time mindfully. And also there's another meditation called the body scan, which is a great piece of work that you need to do on yourself to get rid of some of your repressed emotions that you've had over your years, that you've stored in the most peculiar parts of your body, because you don't want to deal with it. And when you have a body scan and you start to connect and feel like with your big toe on your right foot, for instance, you didn't realize that you actually stored a lot of emotion in that part of your body, when your dad died, or when your cat got run over, or your dog was ill, or whatever the scenario is. And then when you start to focusing on that big toe and you open it up, it's amazing what comes out. And that being able to clear those repressed emotions and through mindfulness meditation is key. Once you build that out, and it's a word I use quite a lot, is we cultivate. It's all about cultivation. You know, you can't open your front door and run to the end of your street and then expect the very next day to run a marathon. It doesn't happen. Okay. What you have to do is you have to continually keep training. And it's like that with mindfulness meditation. The more you do it, the more you cultivate it, the better you become, the more you can do that. And then when you flip that then into I'm talking about your physical. When you come over to your spiritual, the ability again through meditation, to be able to sit in the energy with spirit for yourself. Okay. And this is where things get a little bit confused for me. This is why I'm a little bit different, I suppose, is if you go to a circle, or if you go to a church, or if you go to a group, or if you go to a class or a training session, wherever you go, they will take you sometimes into a guided meditation or into a meditation. But when you come back, the first thing they always say to you is, have you got a message for somebody? Well, let's just stop right there, because it's not about anybody else. It's about you. It's about you sitting in the energy and actually setting the intention of, I don't want a message for anybody else. I want to sit in a guided meditation for the next 30 minutes, and I want spirit to come close, and I want him to show me what I need to be shown. I want him to teach me. I want him to talk to me. I want him to guide me. I want him to inspire me. I want him to help me build my connection and relationships with spirit in a way that is amplified 1,000,000 times over, and then start to see results. Because ultimately, the more you practice, the more you set the right intention, the luckier you become. And I think it was John Wooden, who's from American college basketball college coach, and he says, if you do everything right in training and you prepare right, the results will take care of themselves. And that's like anything. And spiritualism and mediumship is exactly the same. The more you can sit in the energy of spirit for yourself, not for anybody else, for yourself, the better your connection will become. And then when you're ready to say, my intention is now, I want you to give me a message for the person that sat in front of me that has come to see me today. That's what I want you to do for me. And you will notice a huge difference. But it takes time to be able to build that connection relationship. And the only way you can build that connection and relationship is through meditation, because that is our opportunity and our gateway to connecting with spirit.
It is. The meditation is so important. I've noticed how much I've been meditating for a number of years now, and just how much it really has amplified everything. You know, it makes you feel so much calmer, so much more peaceful. It just really tunes you into that unseen world around you. And I've gotten to a place, and this is why I tell people, you know, focus on that presence, see what comes. Because when I meditate now, a lot of times what I do, I've done a lot of work with the angels over the years. So I'll just tune into the angelic presence, and sometimes I'll even ask a question before I go in to meditation. And then I'll just go in, clear my mind, focus on that presence, let myself go deeper. And I guess it's kind of like what you said, you know, sitting in the circle, the messages start coming, the images, the words, the sentences. And it's almost like a little mediumship session every time.
Yeah.
And it really does. It starts to spill over to where, like you said, if somebody wants a reading, you're much quicker to be able to pull something out and give it to them. And it's also a good exercise, I would say, for people if they want to try that technique. Ask a question for somebody else. Go to your brother, your sister, your spouse, and say, is there something, someone you'd like to communicate with, or a message from spirit, a question you would like to ask? Ask that question for them, and then do that kind of meditation. See what comes to you. As soon as you come out of it, write it down and take it to them. See if it's valid. If you miss it, you miss it. Like you said, it takes practice. We can't we can't get discouraged if they look and say, no, that doesn't really make sense to me, because sometimes later on it will.
Yeah.
You know, I did it for my wife a few weeks back, just meditating. And then I brought something to her and she's like, nah, I don't remember that. And then she came back 2 hours later and she was like, you know, now that I think about it, there was this and this, you know, and it was, sometimes people just don't remember, and their information kind of jogs their memory.
No, and I think that's really valid. And I think one of the things, you know, we have to remember here what we're trying to achieve, and we're trying to achieve is a connection with spirit. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve a connection with spirit. And people say, but I want messages. Well, you can't get messages unless you have the connection. So our job here, and our responsibility and our ownership and what we're trying to do is to try and build that connection. And the only way you can build that connection, I believe, is by I think there's three types of meditation. I think there's the mindfulness meditation, which is all about your connection and your inner self. There's the spiritual meditation, which is where you need to sit in the energy with spirit and see what happens and work with them. And then there's a power meditation. And the power meditation is a very quick meditation for you to be able to open yourself up, because you've built the connection. You can just very quickly open the connection, and then off you go. Because a lot of people make mistakes by sitting in meditation for 30 minutes and then wanting to give a reading. Well, for me, that's far too passive. You know, you want energy. You've got to own it. You've got to experience it. You've got to step into it. You've got to go, right, I'm going to do a message. I'm going to open myself up. Here we go. I'm in now. Okay, so who's coming forward? You know, but off we go. But, you know, that power meditation is really the putting, whereas the mindfulness and the spiritual meditation is understanding how to even put a ball on a tee. You know, and that's where it is. And the problem with a lot of it is that, you know, the mindfulness and the spiritual meditation isn't as sexy as connecting with spirit straight away and getting a message for somebody who's in front of you, which is, you know, rock star evidence. You know, your dad's name was John. He was born on a Thursday. He died, you know, with lung cancer on a Friday, and his brother Sam was there. You know, people, wow, you know, and that's great. But the reality of the situation is that takes time. And again, I've even got stronger and further beliefs about that. And you know, and I think that's important to get people to understand as well, is, you know, our why are we doing this? And for me, it's about serving spirit. It's about developing ourselves, but it's about healing people. And even, you know, the simplest reading or message can heal anybody. But, you know, we don't do it. I've got a big bugbear, and you sort of touched upon it a little bit, is when mediums, it becomes about them. And it becomes about them being able to say, God, look how good I am. And I gave the name of his father, the color of his car, his registration and mobile number. And I'm just amazing. Well, the reality of the situation is that you've done extremely well to build your connection. But the reality is that you are getting that information from somebody else. So don't think you're very clever, because, you know, ultimately you're not even, you know, getting the information yourself. It is being given to you, but you've done the right thing to be able to build that connection. And I've worked with lots of mediums to the point, and I see it quite a bit, you know, and it's a passionate subject about me, so I'd like to just get it out. But, you know, I was working with a gentleman in a cancer charity night where we were doing like a stage to about 250 people. And I'd given some good readings. It was great. Everything was going really well. And just before the halftime interval, the gentleman who I was working with was giving a reading to this woman. And she was quite quiet. And it was, you know, anyway, that went on for about 5 minutes. And at the end, at the halftime interval, as we're walking through the middle of the audience to go and have a cup of coffee, the woman comes up to him and says, I could understand all of that. And I could understand the part about my dad. And he stopped and he said, well, why didn't you say, you know, why didn't you say that you could take everything I was giving you? And I didn't say anything at the time. And he walked in the room and I said, why did you just do that? Why is it important that she publicly said that you were right?
Right.
Because is this for you or is it for her? Because if it's for you, I'm not going to stand on the stage with you in the second half, because it doesn't matter if that person didn't acknowledge or give me anything back. If I've given her pertinent information that is personal and private to her, and she can understand it, I don't care if the other 199 people think I got that reading wrong, because I don't care about the other 199 people. It was that lady's dad who was there at the time, and that's all that matters. And that sets us apart, and that sets me apart, I think, from a lot of people within the industry who actually see it as a show, as a how good am I? He's an amazing medium. He gives all of this information. But you know what? The reality of the situation is, I don't care if anybody doesn't say anything to me. If they leave that auditorium feeling better than when they came in, that's all that matters to me.
Exactly.
And that's what it's all about. And unfortunately, like in any, I call it an industry because it is an industry, or any religion, there are always people who I wouldn't like to have a beer with at the end of the night. And there's people who I'd love to have a beer with at the end of the night. But for me, your intention has to be right. And the intention is to serve spirit, develop yourself, and heal people. And in fact, out of the three of those, the middle part, me, is the one that I care about the least, because I know if I heal people and serve spirit, I'll naturally develop myself.
Right. And I think I could speak for both of us when I say that it's all about the love.
Yeah.
You know, love of God, love of spirit, love of our brothers and sisters and loved ones in spirit, love of the people that are with us and trying to help them and heal them. It's a very different feeling and a very different motive, rather than being flashy. You know, like you said, look at me, look how good I am.
Yeah.
And I tend to avoid. I'm very fussy who I let read for me.
Yeah.
And the minute I catch the ego, and I know that love's not there, that person has that special something, that love connection with spirit, with the person they're reading for as their brother or their sister, to say, I really want to make a difference here, I want to help, it's a no-go, you know, because the flashy stuff, I don't know. There's a lot I could say.
But unfortunately, unfortunately, society dictates that that's going to happen because, you know, as I said, I worked in sport for many years, and when you get, you know, an NFL game of 70,000 people in a stadium, society dictates there's muggers, there's rapists, there's pedophiles, there's people you wouldn't want to have a beer with, there's, you know, because it's a snapshot of society. And when you've got hundreds of thousands of mediums all over the world, then that too is going to be a snapshot of society. But what it does do is it I think it's detrimental and makes the true light workers' job even harder. And you know, even when I knew 2 years ago that I knew that this now was going to be my full calling and this is what I had to do, my motive was to try to either help teach mediums and psychics and healers to be better, to move away from what I call is clairvagueness. You know, people are too vague on readings, you know, and I was sick to death of sitting in a hall listening to somebody say, I've got your grandmother with me and she likes bacon, and she wears a penny, and, you know, just all of the typical bullshit, stereotypical stuff that most grandmothers would have been acceptable. 90% of the Western world would have accepted it. Not turning around and saying, I've got your grandmother with me, her name is Philippa, and she remembers the time she had to pull a piece of wood out of your knee when you fell out of the tree that one time when she was baking apple pie. And because, again, it comes back to when you have that connection with spirit and you develop it and you cultivate it. So going back to the three types of, you know, meditation, there's the mindfulness for you, there's the spiritual meditation for you, and then there's the power meditation when you've got the other two spot on to be able to connect and then give readings and draw people close for other people. You know, when you're at that point, then, you know, you want to make sure that that the readings you give are right, and that's our responsibility, and the information that we get and how we deliver that is also very important. Because again, I think we could all probably sit here for 10 podcasts and talk about some of the ways other mediums deliver messages that just I sit there and just think I've got to leave because this is far too embarrassing. But we've got to move away from mediocrity. We've got to move away from clairvoyance, and actually move into 4K. Because if you think about, I'm a big fan of a gentleman called Gordon Higginson, who was one of the forefathers over here, and he worked heavily in a college called Arthur Findlay, which is an amazing, again, my Harry Potter head on, it's our Hogwarts, it's just incredible. And he worked there, and the stuff that he's talking about 30 years ago, we're no further ahead. We haven't really progressed mediumship as far as where we should be. And I think a lot of that comes down to that we took the spirit out of spirituality, we took the spirit out of spiritualism, and then it became a conveyor belt of messages, and the focus was on delivering messages for loved ones, and not actually on spirituality, spiritualism, philosophy. When was the last time you'd seen anyone produce a book that was channeled by a spirit guide talking about how you should live your life and how you should connect and how you should work with spirit? And nowadays it's just I don't know, it's over in America, your John Edwards, your Van Pragues, these people who are just conveyor belts of messages, and it always, for me, it just needs to be much more than that. And that's the frustration for me. And that's my calling. That's why, when I teach, and I try and explain to people that the mediumship, and in particular giving messages from loved ones, is one of the many tools you have in your toolbox. And sometimes I actually believe it's like a grain of sand in the Sahara. There's so much more that can be done and can be worked with, when you build that connection and the ability, like the internet now, for instance, is like this, let's call the internet the spirit world. Now you've got such an amazing connection that I could be sit here in the UK talking to you over in America real time, and I could be searching and flipping and but the problem with spirit is if you use the analogy of the internet, all they're doing all the time is going on the same website. When there's millions of websites to go on, there's millions of things to learn, but they're just looking down the one track all the time. And that's okay, because it's an important track, but we need to widen our horizons. We need to start to connect into spirit and work with them to say, how can we make, our job here is to raise the vibration and leave this place better than when we found it. And I think, over the last 15, 20 years, 30 years, from a spiritual point of view, a lot of people have failed in that, and that's my calling, that's my aim, is to help people to understand that mediumship in particular is the ability to connect with spirit, which then allows you an infinite, amazing resource to be able to develop yourself spiritually, to help your physical, and to live a life that's happy, healthy, and full of clarity and full of purpose. And that's what it's all about. And it's all about helping people and healing and all the rest of it. And then we get, if you type medium in on a Google search, you're going to have messages from loved ones, which is great. And I'm not down crying it, but there's so much more to do. So much more to do.
There is. And that's one of the things I find when I do these kind of readings. And at first I was kind of shy to do it. But then I just kind of opened up, especially when I started reading books by Allan Kardec, who he didn't find, but he more cataloged the Spiritist religion. And when you see the kind of readings that come through for the Spiritists that are very much like you were talking about, how do we live our lives? Things we got to look at ourselves to change, to be more connected. And I find a lot of that coming through. I'll get those little evidential pieces that will come through, but for me, it's always more of it's about them.
Yeah, it's a philosophy, isn't it?
The person seems very humble, but it'll just come. This person is saying to you that you really do look down on other people like you're above them. You
Yeah.
think you're smarter or better, and you're lacking that human connection. And it's a little uncomfortable to tell somebody this, but when they say, "Yeah, I do,"
Yeah.
it's
It's true. It's very true. It's very true. And those things then are, we're making a difference, and that's the key thing for me is the ability to make a difference. And as a teacher, as a coach, I'm just here to help people help themselves, to connect with themselves and with spirit, and build a relationship with themselves and build a relationship with spirit. And then when that happens, then the magic really happens. And don't get me wrong, look, predominantly, I give readings, I give messages, I do rostrum work, I do all of these things, and it's important. I was doing a reading in a hall for about 150 people, another charity event, about 2 months ago, and I got there early, and I opened myself up, and I had so many people come to me, it was unreal, and I forgot more than I gave. And the ability to stand on a stage, and I said, look, I've got the dad just come through, and he's talking about his daughter's in the audience, and his daughter, he's telling me she lives in Glamorgan Street, and 3/4 away up the street on the left hand side, it's a one-way street. Her house has a brown door with a half moon window, and when you go in, I said, can anyone understand and take that for me, please? And the woman just put her hand up and said, yeah, that's my house, that's my dad. And those abilities, and the ability to, I gave 887 as a number, and the woman said, well, I don't know. I said, I'm coming to you, it's coming to you. Your dad's here, and he's telling me all the time, 887, 887. And I said, oh, I've got it. He passed on the 8th of August, 2007. Am I right? She said, absolutely bang on. And I said, you're telling me you've got a tattoo of this on your left shoulder. Am I right? And she said, you're absolutely bang on. And those moments are great. They're amazing, and everyone's like, what? Shut the front door. This is crazy. And it's great, because what it does do is it then brings the pendulum back this way from people who have pushed it the other way. And you do it with empathy and with honesty and with trust and love and everything. And you have the ability to deliver those messages of pure evidence, pure evidence that there's no way in the world I could have known these things, apart from connecting with their loved ones. And it's huge, and it's really good. And don't get me wrong, although I say it's not about me, and when you hit that and it happens, and the person's like, wow, this is insane, then it does feel good, and it does feel good. But for me, that feeling of good means that the practice work that I'm currently doing every single day, cultivating my meditation, myself, my inner self, my connection and relationship with spirit. I keep saying those two things: my connection and relationship with myself, my connection and relationship with spirit, allows those results then to take care of themselves. And I think that's a key going forward. But if I was only going to use it for that, I think it would start to slowly go away, because I also believe that spirit will turn around and say, you've worked hard, you've got a great connection, and we need more out of you now. And I think they will say, well, this guy's just in it for himself, and I've seen really good mediums have the connection diluted to the point they have to go to doing other things, to try and unscrupulous things, to try and get information to be able to deliver readings that then keep them as where they were in the beginning. And I do believe that, like anything, you've got a gift, and that gift can be taken away as quickly as it was given to you. But for me, ultimately, it is about helping others to help themselves, and to build out that connection, because I'm different. I am different, and that's one of the reasons why I do what I do, because I am different. But for me, I have lots of people come to me and say, I had this meditation, it was amazing meditation, and I saw an eagle with a pink feather, and it flew under a rainbow. What does that mean? And I just be honest with them. I say, I haven't got a clue. But because it's your meditation, it's not mine. And actually, when you understand the relationship with spirit, the next time, if you didn't ask the question at that time, why am I seeing an eagle with a pink feather flying under a rainbow, you need to, next time you go in and say, excuse me, well, before we start this meditation, I want you to tell me what was that eagle flying under a rainbow with a pink feather? Because they'll tell you. And that for me, again, is part of my teaching, is that actually I want to take, if I'm your crutch, if I'm the walking stick, I want you to be able to take that walking stick away. I don't want you to have to be dependent on me every 5 minutes to be able to decipher your meditations, etc. And a lot of people forget that when you have that connection, when relationship with spirit, you can ask those questions. You don't need to come to me, because I wasn't there. But unfortunately, I do know there would be mediums going, yes, well, pink is a color for this, and an eagle is very spiritual, and it flew under the rainbow, and it's just absolute twallop. And let's just keep it real. There is a relationship you have with people on the earth plane, and you have a relationship exactly the same with people in the spirit world. And I'll give you one example. I was doing I do a lot of charity work, okay? And I was doing it in a hall for about 300 people, and I had this gentleman, the gentleman was sat in front of me, and I had his mother come in, and she said, his name is Robert. And his dad then walked straight in and said, I call him Bob. And his uncle then walked in and said, his name is neither of those. And I went, right. I said, I'm going to tell you this now, because I've just been given it. Your mum's called you Robert, your dad's called you Bob, and your uncle says your name is none of those. And he said, that's amazing. My mum called me Robert, my dad called me Bob, and my name is Tony. And the whole place just erupted. It was really good. It was clever. It was amazing. And I'm so humbled to be able to do that. And after giving him another 5 minutes worth of information that was very poignant and pertinent, I had a woman walk in, a spiritual woman, and she said, I want to speak to my daughter. And, you've probably, if you've done a rostrum, you know what I mean. You look around the room, and this is the person out of 200 people you didn't want to go to, because she sat there with this grey ashen face, arms folded. She's been dragged there by her mates. She doesn't believe it. Although I've just given some remarkable evidence, her barriers have gone up and not gone down. And I'm thinking, oh my God, out of the whole room, why me? But that's what spirit does for us. They never make it easy. So I start giving this reading from the information that the woman's given me, and she's given me nothing back. She's looking at me, and I'm thinking, oh God, what am I going to do here? But when you actually have some experience and you understand again the relationship with spirit, you have to remember that when you build your connection and you build that relationship, it's a two-way street. If spirit come to me and say, I want you to do something over there, then they don't give me the tools or I need to do it. I'll tell them, you've asked me to go over there. You're not helping you. If you don't help, I'm pulling out and coming back. Come on, guys. And it's exactly what I did with this lady. I said, excuse me, my darling. I never talk out loud because I don't like the theatrical side of that. But I talk through spirit. And I said, excuse me, you're giving me information that she can understand. She sat there with her arms folded, and I need you to help me crack this woman. And she turned around and she said to me, ask Claire to unfold her arms. And I have confidence. I surrendered. I trust. I went, Claire, can you unfold your arms for me, please? And she looked at me and her face changed. And she went, how do you know my name? And I said, I don't, but your mother does. And it was that line and that thing. And that woman now comes to my development circle because, it blew her socks off. But when you're talking about connection and how do you connect and how do you build a relationship with spirit and how do you do that, you do it through those experiences whereby you're saying, throw me a bone. You know what I mean? You want me to speak to your daughter? You're not giving me anything. Come on, what's happening? I'll tell you what I'll do. If you don't give me anything now, I'm going to cut the link because I got a guy here who I can't shut up, and he will tell me everything this son needs to know, and it'll be meaningful. Help me or I'm out. And a lot of people don't think of it like that. A lot of people don't think of it like that. And that is when you start then to understand that there is a relationship as in the same, because if you think of it logically, if that woman was physically stood there and her daughter she was behind a curtain, or her daughter couldn't see her, you'd look at the woman and go, come on, man, give me a hand here. You know, she doesn't recognize who you are. Come on, tell me something. But we don't. We get all in awe of it, and we get all holy and all this, and we forget really what we're doing. And what we're doing is working as a channel, as a conduit, to be able to pass those messages on to people, and you know, that's important. So, you know, understanding that relationship and not being afraid to say, pull your finger out or I'm off, is really important.
All right. Well, in closing, what would you say to those people that they have a loved one pass, they're grieving, they're desperate to get a message right away to see if their loved one is okay, and they turn to something like the Ouija board? Would you recommend the Ouija board, or is that something that you feel people should stay away from?
I think it's like anything. Okay, this is my opinion, and I can only tell you what I believe, because that's what I believe. I believe that when somebody passes to spirit, there is only love in spirit. Okay, there is no bad spirits. I don't think, I've now been in 40 years, I've never had anything. I've never seen it, never felt it, never sensed it, never seen anything. Where there is evil and where there is bad is on the earth. And we get two amazing gifts when we come here. We get the gift of life, and we get the gift of free will. And that free will allows us to do whatever we want. We all bemoan what happens to us, but the reality is we've drawn and painted our own picture. And yes, we would have had, you know, some twists and turns, but in the main, when you're on the planet, I've been here 46, my 47th year on this planet, where I am today is what I have cultivated for myself over that period of time. Now, ultimately, there are people who are not very nice here, and when they pass over and they become love. But what can happen is that they can leave negative residual energy, or if they're not quite past, or they want to, you know, they're hanging around, i.e. ghosts, etc. I believe that those ghosts are not nice because they are still the mirror image of the person, the human that was here, because they're not in spirit. And so when people talk to me about Ouija boards, the problem with the Ouija boards is they get really bad press because of all of the films we've watched. And Hollywood has made a Ouija board something that I believe it isn't. But it's like saying to somebody who hasn't passed their driving test, go and drive a Ferrari. And there's a chance that they may crash and hurt themselves. And what happens with the Ouija board is that they don't know how to use it properly. And then what'll happen is somebody will start putting too much pressure on, messing about with it. And then all of a sudden they'll leave it by saying, oh my God, it spelled death and I'm out. And it doesn't do that. Okay. So for me, a Ouija board is divination. Okay. It is the ability to use something to communicate with spirit. And a Ouija board that is being used by somebody who understands it. There's a lady called Karen A. Dullman, I think her name is, in America, who collects them and is an expert on Ouija. And I've sat with her and spoke to her for long periods of time. And this is where I get a lot of the backstory from it. It is an amazing tool to connect with spirit. It's an amazing tool to connect with spirit when it's done the right way, and there is integrity and there is trust and there is honesty. I wouldn't recommend anybody to go from 0 to 60 spiritually that quickly, because ultimately it's bloody emotional, you know. And if her father, who's passed away 3 weeks ago, and she's on a Ouija board and it spells dad, and you know, that it's not the right environment. And it's not the right environment because I think personally somebody who hasn't had any exposure or hasn't been immersed in spiritualism and spirituality doesn't really understand it. And the ideal scenario is they would have someone like you or I holding their hands, talking to them about what this is and how it's going to work, and don't worry, and there's none of this, and also being the conduit, the not the filter, but being that person to be able to see the father who's passed over, he's getting upset, and then trying to stifle some of that to keep some, because what you don't want, and it has happened, and it's probably happened to you, is you start a reading with the best intention, 10 minutes in, everyone's crying. And then you just lose bits because it just gets too emotional. And our job is, although we do get emotional, and I do get emotional, I always get emotional with babies. But you have to be able to, control that emotion. And that's where our professionalism and experience kicks in, to be able to, ensure our delivery and the message and the environment and everything else is conducive to, that empathetic approach that we need, because ultimately this lady's just lost a dad, and that is game changing for anybody. So I wouldn't recommend somebody who hasn't had any contact or experience with mediumship to dive straight in on their own with a Ouija board. But conversely, it's someone like you or I or somebody else, we should use a Ouija board, because again, it's the opportunity to connect with spirit. And that's, excuse me, and that's important. But I think everything for those people who are not experienced, who are not trained, who don't truly understand it all, I think there needs to be, those sort of things need to be done within a controlled environment, because of the emotion, because of the scale of what we're talking about. And at the end of the day, the loss of a loved one will affect people more than anything else, I would have thought. And we just have to be very, very mindful and thoughtful of that grieving process. I would always recommend that you go and see somebody if you have no spiritual background, rather than trying Ouija boards or pendulums or whatever you want to try, because ultimately you're not experienced enough to be able to deal with it.
Right. It is the truth. A lot of people jump in over their heads, and they don't understand it, or they lose control of it. And
Yeah.
you got to be able to decipher that information in a rational way, where it makes sense, or you're not getting overwhelmed or even scared. Some people, the Ouija board might spell dad, and hey, that's great, but that's scary. So they're gonna, they tuck it away, and this is from the devil, and I never want to look at that thing again.
Yeah, no, and I always say to people about things like that, trying to hydrate yourself through a fire hose isn't probably a good idea. And that's very much like spirituality, the force and the power and and everything that goes with it. It needs to have respect. It needs to have controls. It needs to have, experienced people, not because nothing's bad's going to happen or anything, but it just emotionally, you have to, it can have a detrimental effect. And the whole idea here, as I said before, is to serve, develop, and heal. And if that environment isn't conducive to that person healing, then it's wrong. And that's, that's our ultimate goal. And that's where I teach. And, Udemy has brought us together from the course that you've been on. And I'm really pleased it has, because I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I think you and I could probably speak into the early hours of the morning and hopefully hold some form of quality conversation that we've done in the last hour. But, for me, summing things up, we've just got to think about it differently. And we got to think about this as us, as physical, ourselves, and the relationship and connection with spirit. And once that relationship and connection with ourselves and the relationship and connection with spirit is of a quality, everyone will see the game change. And then in 30 years' time, I would hope they would turn around and say that mediumship, which is the ability to contact and work with spirit, and let's not get that mixed up with psychic, which is the ability to work with energy, and in particular people's energy, is different. And, for me, mediumship is the strong part, because that's where the infinite knowledge, wisdom, philosophy, opportunities are. And if we can then make this world a better place through love, through empathy, through trust, through care, all of those things, I think that's really important. And that's what I'm trying to teach. But also, I don't want anybody to be lonely through their awakening and through their development and through their journey, like I was, and by the sounds of it, like you were too. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
So how might folks get a hold of you if they say, geez, I like this podcast, I like the sound of this guy, maybe I want to get a reading from him? I don't know if you do readings for people on Skype or phone or internet, but how might people learn more about you or get a hold of you if they're interested in a reading or taking some of your courses?
Yeah, I think for me, you can visit my website, which is julianjenkinsmedium.com. And on that front page, there is a free Udemy course for mindfulness. And you just sign up and you can take the mindfulness course free of charge, 100% free of charge. And because I think it's such a pillar for the physical and for the spiritual. So, if you're listening to this podcast, dig right in straight away, and you'll get to see my ugly mug on a video screen coming to you. But you can do that on my website. There's a number of things that I do. I don't at the moment. I'm not doing any mediumship readings. I'm doing some tarot readings, things like that. I'm in the process of dealing out some one-to-one spiritual consultancy. I'm looking at doing some webinars, online circles. So there's lots of things to do. But I think the central resource is julianjenkinsmedium.com. Or if you want to hop over to YouTube, Julian Jenkins Medium is there as well. And there's lots of links to my Udemy courses and my Udemy profile as well. So that's that. They're the main things. And obviously you can find me on Facebook, Julian Jenkins Medium as well.
Great. And I would definitely recommend his courses, looking into his information, because you got some great stuff out there. I'm definitely, I have several of your courses on Udemy. I haven't gotten to listen to them all yet, but really good stuff. We're always the student when it comes to the spiritual. Yeah. There's always somebody out there that has good information, solid information. It takes us to that next level. And, I can vouch that you're one of those people that I think, whether we've been doing this for years or just for a little while, we can certainly learn a lot and sharpen our abilities through what you have to offer. And I'll tell you, if you have one of those online circles, I'm in, brother. I'm going to do it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on. Thank you for your kind words. And I wake up every morning and I flip into my inbox and I read the emails that come through. And that is why I wake up in the morning and do what I do, because, the amount of people who say thank you and all of those things. And it is just so amazing, and long may that continue. And I think if we can shine the light into some of the darkest corners of this world, it'll be a better place. And that's what we're all trying to do. But the beautiful thing is that the internet used in the correct manner can allow us to do that. And that is just so wonderful.
I hear that. Well, sir, we thank you for joining us today and giving your wisdom and insight to the listening audience. And hey, man, maybe you'll do this again sometime. And
I hope so. I hope you have me back on. I hope I haven't, put your figures, your listening figures through the floor and everyone switched off. But we'll never know. But look, thanks for having me on, and keep up the good work, because it's medium like this, is media like this that we need. And well done, Paul. Keep shining your light.
Thanks. And everybody out there, we appreciate you listening. And this is Paul James Caden. I'll see you next time on The Spirit Side.